Here we go for today's number. It's May 24, 2021. 10 balls. Each ball has a number. Numbers 1 through 10. Swirl the numbers. Pick a number. Today's number is 8.
You have an insider tip. The info got to you, Josh, before Goldman Sachs.
I bought into GameStop a couple of days after it became a national news story, and I thought to myself, yeah, this has got to go higher. Just waited for the smart money to get in, bought here. Then when it's just about to hit the bottom, I can't take it anymore. You know, rice paper hands, and that's my sell point.
You have Daytrader in your bio now?
Then it usually starts to go up again. Second dose of FOMO hits. I'm not going to miss it this time. Enjoy the second ride down and sell the bags.
Josh seems to have the magical ability to predict a stock crash based on when he buys it.
You know, for me, it wasn't really about the money. It was about sticking it to the big guys by letting other big guys take my money.
I mean, it should be a little bit about making money.
Well, you pay for your hobby of doing yoga. What's the difference?
Yeah, I didn't take a mortgage out on our house to do yoga.
You know, being manipulated by the mainstream media is really bad for your financial future. I bet that guy watches a lot of CNN. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Nesky of WeAreChange.org, and man, do we have a very important story for you today. As of course, the information that we were telling you close to over a year now on this YouTube channel is now being poorly regurgitated by the mainstream media. A conspiracy theory is becoming a conspiracy truth. We're going to be talking about that, the larger implications, and also what the mainstream media is missing here, since they seem never to do an accurate job. A lot of them just focus on trivial, meaningless distractions and bullcrap that push the larger divide and conquer agenda, as perfectly represented by this Washington Post piece, which they're proudly promoting with a byline saying, quote, masks are off, which means men will start telling women to smile again. This also perfectly represents how prostitutes of the mainstream media are utterly miserable people that need to spread their misery in order to feel better. When you start understanding it from that psychological perspective, a lot of things absolutely make sense, and we're going to be talking about that plus a lot more. But before we do, the clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast is, of course, just a small sample of the full video that Ryan Long released today. The link to his channel is down below in the description, so you could watch it after this video. He definitely deserves a lot more subscribers than he has for the amazing content that he keeps putting together. Now, and yes,
you need. You give the kind of body heat I need. I have to look what kind of beat you need. You give the kind of body heat I need.
Problematic, aka kids? Do you hate gender?
Yeah!
Then get the brand new androgynous action person, G.I. Pack!
Cool!
G.I. Pack gets rid of all the fun and excitement of G.I. Joes and replaces it with self-righteousness and anger.
This dino won't tell me its pronouns. Take this, Nazi.
G.I. Pack comes with awesome accessories like a commuter bike, a soy latte, and a cell phone with instant outrage self-reaction. Pro-life people should die!
Awesome!
But look out! Here comes G.I. Pack's greatest foe!
Marriage is between a man and a woman.
Mike Pence!
Mike Pence and the evil right-wingers will stop at nothing to destroy G.I. Pack, and it's up to you to fight back!
I won't share a meal with another woman unless someone else is present.
Right side of history!
They don't always know just where to turn for guidance. Some grown-ups are okay, but they're too remote. Even if they understood a teenager's problems, they wouldn't really care. As for parents, they're not only too far removed in age, but too uncomfortably close in other ways. They'd get it all wrong and care too much. So the teenage girl often takes her problems to a girlfriend. But since the girlfriend's knowledge of the world is hardly any broader than her own, she can't always be relied on to help. What the teenage girl needs is a wise, steadfast friend who knows the world, especially the world of teenagers. A friend who understands them and respects their privacy. A friend they can trust. This particular need of teenage girls is met effectively by a publication produced expressly for them. Year after year, this magazine wins their confidence. One reason for this, and only one of many, is that the people who create it keep closely in touch with their more than 5 million readers by sending editors on cross-country tours to talk to teens, by carefully studying the thousands of letters which teen readers send to the magazine every month, by consulting teen panels that reflect the views of their contemporaries. For example, to find
Teenage pregnancy rates have been declining across the state, but here in Pennington, they've jumped almost 30%.
That's right, Blake. Experts say that the increase can be attributed mainly to Cody, a handsome teen whose family moved here from Abbotsford last year.
In one typical month here at Pennington's Methodist Hospital, over half of the pregnancies are the result of Cody.
These girls are not getting the education they need about Cody. They don't fully understand Cody, and unfortunately, that's part of the appeal. I mean, after the summer, when Cody gets his tan, it's going to get a lot worse.
Just this month, the health teacher at Pennington High began a new program to teach female students about the dangers of Cody.
I try to teach teens how to say no to Cody even if he plays his guitar for them, along with safe sex with Cody basics, such as how to put a condom on Cody.
Speaking to reporters this afternoon, Mayor Hallinan supported this well-rounded approach, saying an abstinence-only stance on Cody doesn't work.
Simply telling our teens to just say no to Cody isn't realistic. He has a fake ID and he does 100 push-ups every morning. We need to have a frank and open dialogue with our daughters about Cody because he's not going anywhere. His parents just bought the Radburgers' old house.
I tell you, it's tough for kids to wait out on Cody. I myself am pregnant with Cody's child, but I'm not 16.
So on. This is basic, and how that got forgotten in the last few hundred years is a shameful story in the Western Church. So that So I think the church needs to reclaim what was always part of its heritage, a view of the renewal of the whole human race and a new sort of family in which identity, that's one of our straplines for tonight,
We've had a little pause on Tom's video there, hoping it'll come back in just a moment's time. We are live on our live stream tonight, but the point being that Tom was making there, Douglas, that we are looking, the Bible has always had, and Christianity specifically, this idea of an identity. Sorry, I think Tom's back. So Tom, do you want to finish your point? You just got interrupted by the internet for a moment.
Sorry, I wasn't sure where we broke off.
It was just, you were saying that in the Bible it's always been about that neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female, slave nor free, one identity.
And about the point from Acts 17 where Paul says on the Areopagus, hey, God made all people from the same stuff, from the same stock. We belong together. And rather than, and of course, then we get into the trap, which Douglas has written about as well, of the modern idea that we're all identical, including there being no difference between male and female, etc., versus the postmodern idea, which collapses into dozens of different competing identities, each trying to claim the high ground of the victim, etc., etc. And again, I think Douglas and I are on the same page on this one. But then my point would be that the church, in being true to itself and not simply relying on contemporary, rather shallow ethical maxims, but being true to its original gospel, actually has the makings of doing what at its best some of the woke ideologies are seeking to do, which is a genuine passion for justice. And forget the fact that the Marxists have come in on the act. Of course they have, because if the church misses out half of its agenda, it shouldn't be surprised if other people come rushing in from the side to fill it in. So that's where the issue, I think, has to lie. But I was grateful for what Douglas said, because it seems to me if an elderly theologian has anything to offer to the world, it may be the reminder of some of the deeper, richer stuff which is out there, which is in the Bible, for goodness sake, and which can refresh and renew a vision of what we all should be about.
Go ahead, Douglas.
Yes, I think this is very important. It gets to another point I've written about a fair amount in recent years, which is, I think, you know, Justin, I think maybe when we spoke before, we spoke about this, that sometimes people claim that the sort of public ethics of the time are sort of non-existent. That's not quite true. They're trying to dig down in quite a forceful way at the moment. What I was writing about in that article was just one example of that. But as I think I said to you when we spoke before, what I think of as being the most striking failure of the time is the failure to embed any ethic that does not rely on the Christian ethic in regards to the equality of everyone in the eyes of God. Our age is struggling very badly with an attempt to replace that ethic or find another way to do it. And there are various ways which it's tried to do that. Human rights ideology is one way, fairly developed, but I think not successful. And another is effectively the landing on equity as the answer, when it can't be the answer. But I see what people are struggling to do, which is to try to maintain and hold on to this exceptionally important gift of the Christian inheritance. Without the idea of equality in the eyes of God and the value of every individual in the eyes of God, you are left with these attempts to assert that, for instance, everyone is the same, or can be, and it's clear that we can't be and that we aren't. And it's one of the great things. If you take away the worry about the loss of the foundation, then it's fine. We can live with it.
I very much see Douglas's point. from where I sit, the only way really to get this sorted is, to use a trite phrase, to go back to Jesus, because in the Jesus of the Gospels, as opposed to the Jesus of much popular imagination, you find a rigorous re-inhabiting of the entire Jewish tradition and a redirection of this vision of what would it look like if God was in charge. That's the question of the kingdom of God. Just supposing God was in charge, how would it look? Well, it might look like a man who had 2 sons and one did this and one. It might look like, and then he heals somebody in the crowd, whatever it is. It's a renewal of human beings, not in order to be identikit, oh, we're all equal now, but in order to be certainly equally valued and equally, though uniquely in themselves, part of an ongoing program that God has launched, not human beings at this point. And so when I then come forward into the 20th and 21st centuries with that, I find myself saying, when I was young, we watched traditional morality go out of the window. It was sex in the 60s, it was money in the 80s. We don't need to obey the old rules. We're going to do it differently. We're the modern world now. And then what's happened is the invention of, and I think Douglas and I agree on this, the invention of neo-moralisms, which is what the woke ideology is really all about. And it reminds me sometimes of, I think it was Caligula, the Roman emperor, well, it might have been Nero, I'm getting this wrong, it's late at night, who put new laws up so high that nobody could read them, and then blamed or punished people for not obeying these new laws that he just invented. And that's very much what's going on at the moment. It's as though society can't live without morality, but if you've banished all the older moralities, you've got to invent some more from the ground up. And we're doing it on a very flimsy basis.
It also goes back to what you mentioned, the Cameron comment, which is what exactly is the project? Because there's an added cruelty, isn't there, to as it were, writing the laws in a place where they cannot be read. There's an added cruelty if you haven't even finished writing them yet, and you tell people to get with them.
Quite.
So one of the questions underneath our era is what exactly are the laws? What are the rules here? The Christian ethic has a set of rules. They can be debated around endlessly, as everyone present knows. But there are foundations to them you cannot deny. They're not wholly abstract. The era we're in. The era we're in.
They are to do with the goodness of. Sorry.
When we don't know.
Yeah. But the Christian morality, it seems to me, is to do with the goodness of creation, but the need for recreation, for redemption and recreation, but a recreation which doesn't say forget the old ways, we'll do it totally differently. I mean, which is what we've got in a lot of society at the moment. Oh, just don't worry about what everyone used to think, we're going to do it totally differently. We're going to change the meaning of words as well as the meaning of behavior, but rather to say no. Try seeing the world from the perspective of a good and wise creator who is revealed in 1,000 ways, whether it's music or beauty or whatever it is, as well as the structures of reality. But this world is out of joint, and the great Jewish vision, and again, I knew and am grieving about Jonathan Sacks, bless him, he saw this so clearly, the great Jewish vision of God's passion for the world, to restore the world, and the vocation of the people of God to be somehow modeling that and showing it forth and saying, this is a self-evidently good way to be human. And so it isn't just thinking through ethical theory, it's about how the community actually lives. And for me, again, this is all about following and worshipping Jesus. And that I know that was folly to the Greeks and scandalous to the Jews in the first century, and it still is today. But if you put that as the coping stone in the middle, everything else will actually fall into place.
Coming back to you then, Douglas, given that you, to some extent, you're both in agreement on the fact that to lose the Christian story and the moral underpinnings that's given culture leaves everyone scrabbling to kind of essentially invent their own morality, and everyone gets very confused and angry with each other in the process. I mean, where do we go from here, I suppose, is the question. And is there a way back even to what now? It's the genie's sort of out of the bottle though, isn't it? I mean, can we go back to that once Christian age where apparently everyone more or less agreed on things?
Yes, I say that in Strange Death of Europe. You can't wish things you know and wish them unknown, or wish them unlearned. And this is something I think is very important in all dialogue between believers and non-believers. I just wanted to say, I wouldn't like it to be anyone to take away from this that I simply think the church has a PR problem. It isn't just that I think that the presentation is wrong, or that there's a mistake in, for instance, falling into the religion of anti-racism or anything else. It's that I do believe that doing that means that the church fails to tell its own story. We had an article in the Spectator, I think last week, from my friend, former Bishop Michael Nazir Ali. He made a very powerful point about the figures in the church, for instance, who were profoundly anti-slavery, and not just Wilberforce, but Charlemagne and others who saints in the 7th century, Christian saints in the 7th century, who were martyred and objected to the slavery in their own time. There is, what I'm trying to say is that it's not just there's a PR misunderstanding, it seems to me, within the church, and it's missing a trick. It is that this is not a fair summary of the Christian story. It isn't a fair summary of the story of the church. And what it is the adoption of a facile and profoundly hostile analysis of the church, which sees the church, for instance, as being a white enterprise. But it clearly isn't. Tom Wright, I've seen congregations across the world, been at services throughout the Middle East, across Africa. The beleaguered communities sometimes show absolutely extraordinary and inspiring levels of faith. And I don't recognize the negative interpretation of the church, which I see from some people trying to force a different ethic on the church today. But as I say, it's not just in the history of the church, but in the story that the church has to tell about itself today, that I think that there is an error being made. Because, for instance, to go back to something which Tom Wright knows I wrote about in The Massive Crowd, if you look at the great error of the ideology which is trying to embed today, it is that it has spent no time bothering itself over the question of forgiveness. Now, it's not just that I think that the church is missing a PR trick in not addressing this. I think that the church does everybody in society the most enormous disservice if it doesn't say, this is what our faith is built upon. We have been thinking about this and trying to practice it, at least, for millennia. So at least give us your ear for a moment. And
that's really important. I was talking to a good friend just this morning on email who has been writing a short article about wokeness, and he wanted me to comment, and I said the one thing you need to point out is that all the woke morality is simply about you guys are wrong and you guys are wrong and you're full of hate and you're this and you're that, and there is no sense that if you repent we'll forgive you. No. You just have to grovel, and it's a morality of I hate to use the word Pharisaism because actually that's a slur on the first century Pharisees, but that's what in the popular discourse it's about. It's about we've got this right and we're making up new laws as we go along, as Douglas has said, and you lot are wrong and you're staying wrong and we're glad you're wrong and we're going to rub your noses in the dirt. And it seems to me that's rather like certain revolutions. I mean, revolutions that eat their own children, where the French Revolution notoriously ended up decapitating quite a lot of people who had been among the leaders of the early movement. And more complicated.
It strikes me that in everything you've said there, that in a sense, though, just even if we are in a quote-unquote post-Christian world, we're not in a less religious world in the sense that these ideologies become quite religious, but not in a very grace-filled kind of religion. And you've spoken about that yourself, Douglas, that there's that kind of aspect to the way people then grasp certain identities and certain causes and ideologies, and that becomes their sort of their identity, their religion. And I suppose this is the problem, isn't it? We are meaning-seeking, story-driven creatures, and if it's not going to be the story of Christianity, it's going to be another story. And the question is, can we live together with these very different stories, which often bump up against each other?
Yes,
but I think that's...
Sorry, Doug. Yes, go ahead.
Out what's on teenagers' minds, the magazine periodically invites high school editors to its New York office for a Turn the Tables press conference. 17's editor-in-chief, Mrs. Enid Haupt, believes in giving teenage curiosity full rein.
Mrs. Haupt, I don't find the boys in my high school very interesting.
Jesus, man.
This is the neighborhood, and you are not welcome.
That's why I need to be here. I need Jesus, man.
sky's blue.